You don't deserve to sit at the table with us. Those were the exact words that shattered something inside me that Thanksgiving morning. And if you're listening to me now, child, then you're about to hear how one sentence can change an entire family forever. I remember the way the air smelled that morning. Warm cinnamon, roasted pecans, and a turkey so big I could barely lift the pan. My old wooden house in Vermont had been preparing for this day for weeks. Thanksgiving, my favorite holiday. The day I got to gather my family close, feed them with my hands, love them with all I had left. But this year felt different. My knees shook a little more than usual. My hands trembled so badly I had to whisk the gravy twice so it wouldn't spill. And my heart? Oh, sweetheart, my heart felt heavy. Heavy in a way I didn't quite understand. Still I smiled. Because that's what grandmothers do. We smile even when our bones ache. Even when the world begins to forget we exist. I set the long oak table, the one my late husband carved by hand 43 years ago. I polished every fork, laid the embroidered napkins I stitched when I was pregnant with my firstborn, and placed the golden candlesticks right in the center like I always did. Everything was perfect. Or at least, I hoped it would be. My son Daniel promised he'd bring his wife, my daughter-in-law Melissa, and our 2 grandkids right at noon. I kept glancing at the clock like a nervous schoolgirl waiting for her crush to call. Every minute felt like an hour. Finally, around 12:40, I heard footsteps on my wooden porch. I wiped my hands on my apron, fixed my silver hair, and forced myself to breathe. "They're here," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. The door opened. The kids rushed in first, their laughter echoing like music in the house. I bent down, arms wide open. "Oh, come here, my darlings, Grandma's missed you." But then she walked in behind them. Melissa. Her heels clacked hard against the wooden floor. Her perfect hair didn't move an inch. And the expression on her face, well, it was disappointment. Pure disappointment. As if simply being inside my home was an inconvenience to her. She glanced at the table once. Then twice. Then she smirked. "You really went all out," she said, not in a compliment, but in a way that made the room colder. Daniel gave me a weak little smile. He always did that, smiling like a scared child caught between his wife and his mother. I didn't blame him. He loved her even when she didn't make it easy to love back. "Dinner's ready," I said softly. "Let's sit, everyone." The children ran to their usual seats. Daniel pulled out a chair for Melissa at the head of the table. And I went toward my seat at the far right end like I always did. But then it happened. Melissa turned around, raised her hand like she was stopping traffic, and said the words that would burn themselves into my memory forever. "Actually, no. You don't deserve to sit at the table with us." I froze. For a moment I thought she was joking. Maybe teasing me about my old chair or my tiny portion sizes. But her eyes weren't joking. They were cold, sharp, mean. "Excuse me." My voice cracked like old timber. "You heard me," she said. "This table is for the family. Not for someone who keeps meddling, judging, and acting like she owns everything. You can sit in the kitchen. It's better that way." The room spun. My ears rang. My hands shook so hard I had to grip the table to stay upright. Daniel whispered, "Melissa, please." But she shot him a look that silenced him instantly. The children stared, confused and frightened. And I felt something inside me crumble. Something I'd held on to for decades. A softness, a patience. A willingness to tolerate things just to keep the peace. I felt it breaking. Because I had never been spoken to like that in my own home. The home I built. The home I raised my son in. The home where I held his tiny hands, fed him soup when he was sick, and tucked him into bed when he had nightmares. And now, I was being told I didn't deserve to sit at my own Thanksgiving table? My breathing grew shallow. My lips trembled. My heart ached in that deep, quiet way only older hearts ache. I walked, not because I agreed with her, but because I didn't trust my legs not to collapse beneath me. I reached the kitchen doorway when something inside me whispered, "You are disappearing. You are fading. They don't see you anymore." And maybe, whoever is watching this video, maybe you know what that feels like. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, before I could swallow the pain, I turned around and said something I had never said in my entire life. "Why do you hate me so much, Melissa?" She rolled her eyes. Don't make this emotional, please. Just stay out of our way, okay? It's better for everyone. Better for everyone. Those words cut deeper than any knife. Warning CTA, mid-chapter audience question. If someone treated your grandmother like this, what would you do? Be honest, tell me in the comments. I want to know. I leaned against the counter, gripping it until my knuckles turned white. Tears threatened to fall, but I blinked them back. Not yet. Not in front of her. I heard the kids whispering. I heard Daniel sighing defeated. And I heard Melissa laughing softly, as if humiliating me brought her some sort of twisted satisfaction. That was the moment. The moment something inside me changed. I realized that I had spent too many years being quiet. Too many years shrinking myself. Too many years letting others decide my worth. And on that day, Thanksgiving Day of all days, I made a silent promise. A promise that would change everything. You don't deserve to sit at the table with us. Well, if they didn't want me at the table, then they were about to learn what happens when a grandmother finally decides she's had enough. I didn't go back to the kitchen right away. I stood there for a long moment, leaning on the counter, staring at the old linoleum floor where thousands of little memories lived. It's strange, isn't it? How a single moment can make the whole world feel unfamiliar. Like suddenly the home you've lived in for decades doesn't recognize you anymore. The voices from the dining room drifted in like echoes underwater. The clinking of forks. Melissa's sharp laugh. Daniel's quiet attempts to smooth things over. The children whispering because even they could feel the tension swirling like a storm cloud. Me? I felt small. Smaller than I had felt in years. Smaller than I had felt even as a little girl. I tried to swallow the ache in my throat, but it stayed. I tried to breathe normally, but my chest felt tight. I set my hand over my heart, not out of drama, but because I genuinely needed to steady it. You know, I've lived long enough to understand something. People don't always break you with big actions. Sometimes it's one sentence, one moment, one humiliation that slices deep enough to make you question who you are. I didn't want the children to see me like that, so I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand and whispered to myself, not now, not in front of them. But then something unexpected happened. A small voice whispered from behind me, Grandma. I turned. It was Lily, my granddaughter, 8 years old. Eyes wide and soft, like her father's used to be before life hardened him. She walked slowly, like she was afraid she'd get in trouble. Why aren't you sitting with us? She whispered. I knelt, my old bones screaming, but my heart making me do it anyway. Honey, I said softly, sometimes grown-ups say things they shouldn't. She hesitated. Mom shouldn't have said that. No anger in her voice, no judgment, just confusion. Pure and innocent. Before I could answer, her little brother Max peeked around the corner too. Grandma, come back, he mumbled. It's weird without you. Oh, sweetheart. They didn't know they were healing me simply by seeing me, recognizing me, wanting me. I hugged them both tightly. Go on, I whispered. Your dad will get worried. We won't start eating without you, Lily said, slipping her tiny hand into mine. My heart cracked all over again. But before I could say anything else, a sharp voice cut through the hallway like a blade. Kids? Why are you back there? Leave her be. Melissa. Her heels clicked like hammers as she strode into the kitchen. She crossed her arms and gave me a look like I was a stain she wanted scrubbed out of her home, even though she was standing in mine. I thought I made it clear, she said coldly. We're trying to have a nice family dinner. The children stepped back instinctively. I rose slowly to my feet, holding the counter for support. Melissa, I said quietly, this is my home, my table, my food. These are my grandchildren. She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. You can have them after dinner. Let us enjoy our meal without unnecessary drama. The kids looked back at me before Melissa ushered them out. I could feel their hesitation. And it burned me, not because of them, oh no, but because she was teaching them that humiliating someone older was normal. I stayed there another minute, letting the silence soak into my skin, letting the pain simmer until it stopped being pain and started becoming something stronger. Resolve. You know, older people aren't weak. We just get tired. Tired of fighting battles we shouldn't have to fight. Tired of being treated like burdens instead of blessings. But there comes a moment, one sudden spark, when even the quietest person decides enough is enough. And for me, that spark was the sound of my own chair scraping against the floor as she pulled it away from the table. She wasn't just humiliating me. She was erasing me. I walked back toward the dining room doorway, not to join them but to observe, to understand what I was truly dealing with. They were already serving plates. Melissa had taken the seat at the head of the table. My seat. The one I always sat in because my husband carved the chair to fit my back perfectly. The one I used when I read bedtime stories to my son. The one I used every Thanksgiving since I was 32. And there she was, sitting in it like a queen on a stolen throne. Daniel looked up at me, guilt in his eyes. He didn't say a word. He just pressed his lips together the way he always did when he wanted to speak but knew he didn't have the courage to. I gave him a small nod. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Just acknowledgement. Then I walked away. I went down the hallway into my bedroom, closed the door softly, and sat on the edge of my bed. My house was filled with people, yet I had never felt more alone. The truth is, being old doesn't protect you from heartbreak. It might even make you feel it more deeply. I stared at the framed photo of my husband on the bedside table. "You wouldn't believe what's happening today," I whispered. "You'd be ashamed of how they're treating me." For a moment I imagined him sitting beside me, his rough carpenter hands covering mine, telling me to stand up for myself, telling me I mattered. I felt something warm roll down my cheek. A tear. One I didn't bother to wipe away. That's when the idea came to me. A decision. A shift. You see, when someone pushes you out of your own home, when they decide you don't matter, you have two choices. You shrink, or you rise. I rose. Not physically, not yet, but inside my spirit lifted. A quiet fire lit in my chest. She thought she could shame me into silence? Oh no, child. She was about to learn something very important. Grandmothers are soft, but we are not weak. I stood slowly but with purpose. My legs steadied. My breath evened. My hands stopped trembling. I opened my closet, pulled out the old wooden box my husband left me. The one I never opened unless a moment truly called for it. Inside were things that had meaning. Things that held power in this family. I took out one item, just one. And as I held it in my hand, I whispered, "If she doesn't want me at the table, then she has no idea what storm she's just invited into her life." I walked back toward the dining room, every step stronger than the last. And I knew everything was about to change. When I stepped back into the hallway holding that small wooden box, the house felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just different. Like it was holding its breath with me. Like even the walls knew something was about to shift. I didn't walk straight into the dining room. No. I stood just at the edge where they couldn't see me yet and listened. Listening can reveal the truth long before anyone says it to your face. Melissa was talking. Of course she was. She always talked like she was the main character in every room she entered. "I just think it's time we set boundaries," she was saying, stabbing a piece of turkey like it had offended her personally. "Your mother inserts herself too much. She's always hovering around the kids, always giving suggestions, always being there. Being there. As if my presence was some kind of burden." I leaned closer, my fingers tightening around the wooden box. Daniel murmured something too soft for me to hear. He always whispered when he disagreed with her. He never raised his voice, never fought back. And that broke my heart more than anything Melissa ever said to me. Because I didn't raise a silent boy. I raised a man with compassion and courage. But somewhere along the line, life carved pieces out of him. Or maybe she did. Max suddenly asked, "Where's Grandma?" With his little mouth still full of mashed potatoes. Melissa sighed dramatically. "She's in the kitchen. She'll be fine." Fine. The kind of word people use when they want you to disappear quietly. Lily asked, "Can she come sit now?" Melissa's fork clattered onto her plate. "Honey, this is adult time. We talked about this." My blood heated. Adult time? She was making it sound like I was some lost toddler wandering into a room I didn't belong in. I closed my eyes for a moment and breathed, letting the anger settle into something sharper, calmer, colder. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg for respect in my own home. I took one step forward, then another, until I appeared in the doorway. The room fell silent. Forks froze. Even the children stopped chewing. Adult time. I said quietly. Melissa stiffened. Daniel's shoulders slumped. The kid's eyes widened with relief. I looked at each of them slowly. Not angrily, no. Just with the full weight of a woman who has lived long enough to see games for what they are. Your mother is eating, Melissa said quickly, trying to regain control. We're busy. Busy. I stepped forward and placed the wooden box on the end of the table. My husband's box. The one I never opened in front of anyone. Do you know what this is? I asked, my voice steady. No one answered. This box, I continued, was given to me the night before my wedding. My husband carved it by hand. He told me, inside this box is the reason our family will always stay together. Melissa raised an eyebrow, annoyed but curious. What's in it? Love letters or something? I shook my head slowly. Inside the box was the original deed to the house. The will. The letters my husband wrote to Daniel about inheritance. And the document that stated in plain legal terms that this home, every beam, every nail, every inch, was to remain under my ownership until the day I chose otherwise. I sat down. Not in my seat. Not in any seat. I just sat calmly on the edge of the room, letting the tension coil tighter and tighter. Before I open it, I said gently, I want to ask something. My eyes landed on Daniel. When did I become a burden in my own home? Daniel swallowed hard. Mom, it's not that. It's just what? I asked softly. Melissa cut in. Don't guilt trip him. We're adults now and adults need space. You can't cling to everything forever. Cling. She used that word so casually, as if the traditions I kept alive, the meals I cooked, the stories I told were nothing more than clutter in their lives. I opened the wooden box slowly. The creak of the hinges made the room feel even smaller. Daniel, I said, not looking up, do you remember when your father died? He nodded, eyes softening. I told you something that day. Do you remember? He shook his head. You were only 19. Your shoulders were shaking and you kept saying, I don't know how to do this without him. And I held your face in my hands and told you, this house will always be your home. No matter what. No matter who. His eyes glistened. But Melissa scoffed. This again? The house is old. We don't even want it. We've talked about moving to Colorado where the schools are better. No, Daniel said suddenly. Melissa snapped her head toward him. What? No, he repeated more firmly. We never agreed on that. Oh, don't start. But he wasn't looking at her anymore. He was looking at me. When I was young, I continued, your father used to say this house had one rule. The table is where family sits. All family. No exceptions. Melissa crossed her arms. Well, maybe it's time to modernize some outdated rules. I finally looked directly at her. And in the calmest voice I had spoken all day, I said, the only outdated thing in this room is the belief that disrespecting elders is acceptable. Silence. Pure electric silence. Even the kids stopped breathing. Melissa opened her mouth, but I raised a single finger and she closed it again. That surprised even me. You told me I don't deserve to sit at my own table, I said quietly. But this house, this table, this family doesn't belong to you. You married into it. And I welcomed you with love. I gave you everything I had. But you mistook kindness for weakness. She shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't trying to. You were, I said firmly. And that's why I made a decision. Daniel straightened. I lifted one paper from the box. The newest document. The one I signed last year when I rewrote my living trust. The one that stated exactly who would inherit the house. Exactly who would be allowed to stay if something happened to me. I placed it gently on the table. This house, I said softly, will go to my grandchildren. Not to either of you. Not if disrespect is the price. Melissa paled. Daniel looked like he was torn between relief and panic. But I wasn't finished. I looked at the children. Lily. Max. I want you to remember something when you grow up. A family table is sacred. Everyone deserves a seat. Everyone deserves kindness. If someone ever tries to take that from you, you stand up. Max whispered. We want you at the table, Grandma. My heart melted, but it didn't break this time. I stood up taller than I had all day. And tonight, I said quietly, I will sit at my own table. Then I looked at Melissa. And with no anger, no bitterness, just truth, I added. If you don't like that, you may leave my home. She froze. Her face drained of color. Because for the first time since she walked into my life, she finally understood. I wasn't the weak one. She was. For a long moment nobody moved. Not a breath. Not a whisper. The house itself seemed to pause, as if waiting to see what would happen next. Melissa's face turned stiff, pale, almost chalky, like she couldn't believe someone as quiet as me had dared to stand up to her. Her fork lay untouched on her plate, her eyes flickering between me, the wooden box and the document I'd placed so gently on the table, as if it were a bomb waiting to explode. Daniel looked frozen. Not angry. Not upset. Just stunned. Like he had suddenly remembered the woman who raised him wasn't made of paper but of bone, and a lifetime of strength he'd forgotten. The children were watching me with wide eyes. Not scared, no, not at all. They were watching me the way you watch a hero step out of the shadows. I didn't want to be a hero. I just wanted to be respected in my own home. But sometimes, life pushes you into roles you never asked for just to remind the world who you are. I stepped toward the table, and the floor creaked under my weight. Melissa flinched, as if the sound itself threatened her. I'm going to sit now, I said softly. At my own table. With my family. I pulled out my chair, the one she'd stolen, and lowered myself into it. Not angrily. Not defiantly. But with the quiet dignity I had earned through a lifetime of surviving storms far worse than her. Daniel finally moved. He stood and placed his hand on the back of my chair, like he used to do when he was a boy helping me carry groceries. His voice cracked when he said, Mom, I'm sorry. I patted his hand. Sit, Daniel. We'll talk later. He nodded and sat. But Melissa, she didn't sit. She stood there, fists clenched, trying to decide whether her pride was worth more than her place in the family. I saw the war in her eyes, the calculations, the fear, the stubbornness. She wasn't used to losing. She certainly wasn't used to being challenged. Are you serious right now? She finally said, her voice tight. You're making this into a spectacle. I shook my head. You made it one when you told me I didn't belong at my own table. She took a step forward, then stopped, her jaw tightening. You're turning Daniel against me. No, I answered calmly. You're doing that yourself. She flinched again. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Melissa, just sit down. Please. She looked at him with disbelief. You're taking her side? After everything. Taking her side? He repeated, exhausted. You humiliated her today. In her house. On Thanksgiving. What did you expect? I expected you to support me, she snapped. I've supported you, he said softly. More than you realize. But not when you're wrong. Her mouth opened then closed. She wasn't used to hearing no from him. The children exchanged glances. Lily whispered, Mommy, please don't fight. That did something to Melissa. You could see it. Her face softened just a little, like a crack in a hardened shell. She took a long breath and looked at the kids, then at the table, then at me. She didn't apologize, not yet, but she lowered herself into the chair beside Daniel. The quiet after that was heavy. Heavy with things unsaid. Heavy with emotions that had been ignored for years. Finally, I picked up my fork and took a bite of turkey. It tasted like nothing and everything at once. Warm. Familiar. Healing. Let's eat, I said softly. The children smiled and dug into their plates. Daniel nodded and followed their lead. Melissa remained stiff, her fork hovering above her food, her thoughts loud enough to fill the room. We ate in silence for several minutes. Only the sound of silverware touching plates broke the tension. Every now and then I caught Melissa glancing at the wooden box, her eyes narrowing. She wanted to know what else was inside. She wanted to understand what power I held that she had overlooked. After a while, Daniel cleared his throat. Mom, what's really in that box? I looked at it. The smooth wood. The carvings my husband made by hand, each line etched with love. Memories, I said softly. Promises. And reminders. Reminders of what? Lily asked innocently. That family is a privilege, I said. Not a guarantee. Melissa shifted in her seat. She held her napkin in her lap, twisting it slowly. So you're threatening us? No, I said. I'm reminding you. reminding all of us, respect isn't something you demand, it's something you give. She pressed her lips together. And if I apologize, will that make you reconsider whatever you put in that will? I sighed. Melissa, this isn't about money, or inheritance, or this house. It's about kindness. It's about how we treat each other. You think I care more about walls and paperwork than people? No. I care about the example we set for these children. She blinked once, twice, like she was trying to understand a language she'd never heard before. What example did I set today? She asked quietly. I looked at her, not with anger, not with bitterness, but with an honesty she wasn't used to facing. You showed them that humiliating someone older is acceptable. You showed them that cruelty can live under the disguise of boundaries. And most painfully, you showed them that being family doesn't automatically mean being kind. Silence again. But this silence was different. It wasn't angry. It was reflective. Melissa's shoulders lowered. Her spine softened. Her eyes for the first time that day looked less like weapons and more like questions. She swallowed. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It did, I said. And that's what matters. She nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to her plate. I don't know why I acted like that. Because you're overwhelmed, Daniel said softly. And instead of talking about it, you lash out. She looked at him with surprise, as if he had held up a mirror she'd never dared to face. And because, I added, you see me as competition instead of someone who wants to help. Melissa's eyes filled with something I didn't expect, tears. Not dramatic ones. Real ones. Small, trembling ones. She quickly blinked away. I didn't grow up with a mother who cared, she said quietly. I don't know how to accept it without feeling threatened. There it was. The truth beneath all her sharp edges. I reached across the table slowly and placed my hand over hers. She didn't pull away. You don't have to fight with me, I said gently. I'm not your enemy. I never was. Her lips trembled. I didn't know how to trust it. And now you do, I whispered. If you choose to. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Daniel looked relieved. The children smiled again. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled softly. The storm had passed. But the sky wasn't clear yet. Not completely. Healing takes time. Forgiveness takes effort. Understanding takes patience. But something had shifted. Something important. The table no longer felt like a battlefield. Felt like a beginning. In that moment I knew the truth. Sometimes a family doesn't fall apart. Sometimes it cracks just enough to let the light in. I remember that night as clearly as the lines on my palms. I sat alone in my quiet kitchen. The same kitchen where I once fed my son warm soup when he had fever. Where he used to hug me from behind saying, Mom, your food tastes like home. Now even his voice felt like a ghost wandering in the corners. And as I sat there, turning their harsh Thanksgiving words over in my mind, something inside me finally broke, but not in the way they expected. No, my dear, something woke up. I wiped my tears, stood up slowly, and walked to the hallway mirror. For the first time in years, I didn't see a weak-old woman. I saw a grandmother who raised a good man, who sacrificed her youth, her dreams, her comfort, and still got told she didn't deserve a seat. A shaky laugh slipped out of me, the kind that comes from hurt so deep it turns sharp. I whispered to myself, if they think I'm small enough to push aside, they've forgotten who I am. So that night I made a decision. A quiet, gentle, deadly decision, the kind that doesn't shout, it simply changes everything. I brewed tea with my trembling hands, sat down again, and pulled out an old wooden box from under the cabinet. Inside it were the papers and memories they thought I'd forgotten. The ones they didn't even know existed. The deeds. The will. The financial ties. The family connections that once ran through me like roots through soil. I touched each document as if I were touching my past. And in that moment I realized something heartbreaking but true. I had spent my life giving. It was time to stop giving to people who only took. I didn't raise my son to be blind, but somehow life had fogged his eyes. And his wife? Oh, the confidence she had to embarrass me in front of everyone. It didn't come from strength. It came from the belief that I was already defeated. But my dear, old age is not defeat. Old age is power wrapped in softness. So I took a deep breath, held the warm cup for courage, and made my plan. quietly, carefully, with the sharp clarity that only years of heartbreak can teach. Tomorrow they would learn. Not through anger, not through revenge, but through truth, through consequences, and through the strength of a grandmother who had finally remembered her worth. Because I wasn't going to let anyone push me away from my own family's table again. Not without understanding exactly what seat I truly held. My dear, come closer. Chapter 6 begins like a whisper in the dark, the kind of whisper only a grandmother with a wounded heart can speak. That morning the house felt colder than usual. Maybe it was the winter wind. Or maybe it was the space inside me where love once lived. I wrapped my colorful shawl around my shoulders, the one my son bought me years ago, before marriage changed everything, and I sat with a firmness I hadn't felt in years. I dialed my lawyer. Not out of anger, not out of ego, but out of clarity. When he picked up, he sounded surprised. "Ma'am, it's been a long time." I smiled sadly. "Yes, too long. I need to update everything." There was silence, the kind that tells you someone suddenly understands the depth of your pain. He came over within the hour. I sat him down at the same table where my daughter-in-law told me I didn't deserve a seat. Oh, the irony. The sun hit the wooden surface exactly where her hand had slammed down when she pushed my plate away, and for a moment I felt that sting again. But then I straightened my back. A small rebellion, my dear, but it felt like lifting a mountain. "I want to change the will," I told him. "I want to redirect everything. House, savings, property. All of it." He raised an eyebrow. To whom? That question shook me, because truth was, I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to hurt my son. I only wanted respect. A simple chair at a table I had built with my own hands. I closed my eyes and a tear slipped down, not of weakness but acceptance. "I'll decide soon," I whispered. "For now, freeze access. Everything." He nodded. Professional. Calm. But I could see shock flicker in his eyes. When he left, the house suddenly felt even quieter. Too quiet. So I took my coat, gathered my strength and walked out the door. My steps were slow, but each one felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. I didn't go to my son's house. I didn't call him. I didn't explain myself. Instead, I went somewhere else, to a place far more important. A small retirement cafe in town, the one where older women go when they no longer want to feel invisible. The bell above the door rang softly as I entered, and a few familiar faces turned toward me. "Mary? Is that you? Come sit with us." Their voices were warm, inviting, safe. I sat down at a table full of women who had known heartbreak, disrespect, abandonment, and yet they were laughing, living, glowing like the last embers of a fire that refuses to die. One of them squeezed my hand and said, "You look like you've been carrying something heavy. Let it out." And for the first time since Thanksgiving, I did. I told them everything. My daughter-in-law's words, my son's silence, the humiliation, the loneliness, the decision I had just made. They didn't interrupt. They didn't judge. They simply listened, and held my pain like it was their own. When I finished, a woman with silver curls leaned forward and said, "My dear, you didn't lose a seat at the table. You finally realized it was the wrong table." Her words hit me deeper than any insult ever could. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. I felt heard. I felt like I mattered. And in that cafe filled with soft music and warm hearts, I made another decision. Not about money, not about revenge, but about myself. Tomorrow, my dear, tomorrow I would face them, but on my terms. And when I did, nothing in that house would ever be the same again. The next morning I didn't tremble. I didn't hesitate. I didn't feel small, not anymore. I wore my brightest cardigan, the one with deep red and gold tones, the colors that make me feel alive. I brushed my silver hair, slipped on my warm boots, and looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time in years, I saw a woman who deserved respect. Not pity, not silence, respect. I grabbed my purse, stepped outside, and headed straight toward my son's house, the place where I had laughed, loved, cooked, cried, and the place where I had been told I did not deserve to sit at the table. The walk felt long, but every step was full of purpose. When I reached the door, I knocked. Not lightly, not timidly, a firm, steady knock. My son opened it. His eyes widened. Mom? You could have called. I smiled, a calm, gentle smile that held more strength than yelling ever could. No, I said softly. Today I didn't come to be invited. I came because I belong. I walked past him and stepped inside. The house smelled like morning coffee and cinnamon pancakes, smells that used to mean warmth. Now they just reminded me of everything that had changed. My daughter-in-law walked in from the kitchen. She froze when she saw me. Oh, she said sharply. You're here. Her tone stabbed the air between us. But I didn't shrink. I didn't fold. I didn't bow my head. I looked her straight in the eyes. Yes, I said. I'm here. And we need to talk. She crossed her arms, defensive, irritated, ready for war. My son sighed, rubbing his forehead. Mom, maybe we should do this another. No, I cut in. We do this now. The room went quiet. So quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. I walked to the dining table. Yes, that table. And gently placed my hand on the chair she pushed away from me on Thanksgiving Day. This, I whispered. This is what hurt me. Her eyes narrowed. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Oh, the way my heart tightened. But I stayed calm. It wasn't nothing, I said. It was disrespect. And I won't allow that anymore. She scoffed. So what? You're here to lecture us? To control the house? I raised my hand. No, I'm not here to control anything. I'm here to tell you something important. And I need you to listen. My son stepped forward, worried. Mom, what's going on? I looked at him with all the love a mother carries, even when her heart is cracked. I spoke to my lawyer, I said. And I froze everything. His face drained of color. Everything, he whispered. Yes, I replied softly. Until I know who respects me, and who only tolerates me. My daughter-in-law's jaw dropped. What are you doing? Are you threatening us? No, I said gently. I am protecting myself. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I saw my son truly look at me, not as an obligation, not as a burden, but as a mother who had been wounded. Mom, why didn't you tell me? He whispered. I smiled through the ache in my chest. Because you didn't ask. You didn't notice. You didn't stand up for me. My voice cracked just a little. I raised you to be kind, to defend what is right, to respect the people who loved you first. He swallowed hard, guilt rising in his eyes. Before he could speak, I continued. I don't want money to control anyone. I don't want revenge. But I will not be treated like furniture in a home I helped build. Then I turned to my daughter-in-law, not with anger but with truth. My dear, I don't need you to love me. But I do need you to respect me. And if you cannot give me a seat at this table, I will build my own. For a moment, a beautiful heavy moment, silence filled the room. My daughter-in-law looked confused, shaken, almost scared by my calm strength. My son, oh my son, his eyes were full of tears he didn't dare let fall. Mom, he whispered, voice breaking. I'm sorry. I should have been there. I should have spoken up. I placed my hand on his cheek. You still can. He nodded slowly, painfully, like a man waking from a long dream. And then in the softest voice, he turned to his wife and said, She's my mother. She belongs here. The shock on her face, my dear, it was like watching ice melt. But whether she softened or hardened, that was no longer my concern. Because I knew one thing. I had found my strength. My voice, my dignity, and no one, not even family, would take that from me again. I returned home that night, my heart lighter than it had been in years. The house felt warmer, not because of the fireplace, but because I had finally remembered my own worth. My son hugged me tight, and the children smiled as if they had witnessed something magical. Melissa stayed quiet, but I didn't need her approval. I had learned something far more important. Respect isn't given, it's earned. And a grandmother who knows her value will never again let anyone take her seat at the table, at her table in her life. I sipped my tea, closed my eyes and whispered to myself, no one can ever push me aside again. And in that moment I knew, I was finally free.